Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the full educational video about Surat Al-Ikhlas. In today's video, we are going to first recite Surat Al-Ikhlas and then mention to the direct meanings of the surah, and then we will see the lessons that we could learn from the surah, and the last thing we'll see the application tips. How could we apply the lessons that we learned from the surah? So follow the video till the end.
الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. Now the lessons that we learn from the surah. First, we learn the absolute oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one and unique in His oneness. For sure, there is nothing comparable to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's oneness is a fundamental pillar and a fundamental in Islam. Second, we learn that Allah is self-sufficiency, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is self-sustainer. He is there by Himself. He didn't need anyone or anything to be there. On the other hand, everything and everyone is depending on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the ultimate source of help, and He provides help for everyone, but He is not to receive it. He doesn't need any help from anyone. Third lesson, the rejection of the divine offspring, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not have parents and He doesn't have sons. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one and alone. Fourth lesson we learn from the surah, Allah's uniqueness. There is nothing comparable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is nothing that is equal to Allah, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also doesn't have any partners. His attributes are unique, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fifth lesson we learn from the surah, the importance of believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, which is monotheism. The surah talks about a very important pillar in the Islam, which is believing in the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and declining the partnership for Allah, or declining anything else other than worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the surah highlights a very important rule in Islam, which is believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. Now we go to the practical aspects. How could we apply these lessons from the surah? While Surat Al-Ikhlas is a very important surah, it is hard to know what should we do then? How could we answer this question? After learning the meanings of the surah, now what? What should I do? Well, first, how can I implement Tawheed? You implement Tawheed by directing your worship slowly to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Seek help only from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's plan completely, like complete trust, without having any objections. Also, avoiding associating partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in any form. The second application tip, how can we practice the self-efficiency for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the self-sufficiency for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? First, make a relationship between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Since Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is self-sufficient, be depending on Allah, depend on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Remember ultimate power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there to help you, is there to make you have that, or kind of this attribute. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala likes us to do or to be in the best forms, likes us to have kind of self-sufficiency, but only depending on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So depend on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and go ahead, achieve all of your goals, inshallah. The third application tip, understanding our position as creation. So we know now who is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we know our position. We know as we are servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are here to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the best way possible and to achieve our goals. This is should be our ultimate goal, that to be the best worshippers or the best servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like the Prophets alayhim salatu wassalam. The fourth application tab: appreciating Allah's uniqueness. And that it could be by avoiding for sure comparing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to his creation, respect the distinct nature between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the divine attributes, and the creation, purify our understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and teach the ones who are closer to you, or teach others about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's uniqueness. By implementing these lessons, we can develop a strong relationship between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That strong relationship leads out and inside makes our life full with blessings and light from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thank you so much for watching. Do not forget to like and subscribe, share the video, and see you in next video, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.